Off Script with Super E recommends listener discretion, as these real but sometimes uncensored stories can be filled with mature content. Hello everybody, Jay here with another episode of Off Script with Super E. As always, my good buddy A-Train. A-Train, say something from your palatial studio.
Yeah, this is A-Train broadcasting from A-Train Studios. How is everybody?
I'll bet they're great. And of course, we have Super E from the Super E bunker that we understand today is your garage with a new kitty mama. Is that true?
Exactly. Our neighbor got a cat. He put her on the ground, and she immediately darted over to our house with the other feral cats, and she hasn't left. And now she has kittens in my garage.
Okay, Dwight from The Office, can you tell everybody what a feral cat is?
A feral cat is a cat that you have no attachment or ties to, shows up, sticks its paw out, and demands food. That's a feral cat.
Oh, I dated a girl like that once, but
there you go.
Right.
Hey, Super E, does that make you feral? Because you've been known to stick your hand out for food. So
exactly. That's a reputation that was started by my mom. I don't like it to get around.
No, it's around, dude.
Didn't Super E always pick up the tab at lunch?
Negative. My pockets were a little too deep for me to reach the cash.
Hey, he paid for it with entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. Got that right. And he's still entertaining, and that's a really good way to just segue right into it there, A-Train. So, Super E, tell us a tale.
Well, this tale talks about a prostitute that I had tried to get for a long time. She was one that was out on the street all the time, tons of complaints against her. She was extremely smart because she heard about, there's a long-haired guy out there with a beard, blah, blah, blah. And so I had picked her up several times, and she just wasn't convinced that I would be okay to date sex for money. She thought, danger here. He might be the police. So I would just let her out. This went on for about 3 months. And then one night, me and my partner, Steve, Big Steve, we were out. It was middle of winter, below freezing. There was about 4 feet of snow on the ground. And we were checking complaints of street prostitutes in the main area of the hot dog stand, where we got most of our complaints.
So they would even get out and roll around in the winter in the snow, even just right on the street.
Crack has no limits on its addiction for people.
It makes you impervious to cold and heat.
Yes. And it didn't matter. 10 feet of snow, they'd be out there. Yeah. And so are the perverts looking for this sex for money from the prostitutes. And I see this girl walking along. Now, remember, it's freezing. All I see is she's wearing a coat, but she must have a short skirt on because all I see is long legs. So I told Steve, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just going to see what it is. There's a girl with just a coat on, short dress, and high heels in this freezing weather. So she jumps in, and I recognize her. It's Summer. That was her name. And I'm like, oh, God, she's going to recognize me or think she knows me, and she's going to get out, because my plan was play basketball right after we got done with this little investigation. I was going to head down to this gym that we went to and would play. So I'm dressed in my Kmart brand basketball shoes, sweatpants. I'm just wearing a wife beater. I got my Raiders jacket. I'm not wearing it, but it's just, I had it on my backs. I had it on my seat, kind of over my shoulders, kind of one of those things. Because, so like when you're riding around in a car and it gets warm, I didn't want to be like John Candy and Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. off as I was driving.
That's one of the best scenes ever.
Yeah. So I would have it off me. So I'm just basically, I have the wife beater on and the sweatpants. So she gets in the car and she's looking around. She's looking me up and down and asking me 1,000 questions. And then she says, are you sure you're not the police? I go, no. She goes, you got a driver's license? Those ones, these things. And I said, yes. And I stupidly had my wallet in my console right between the two seats.
Mm-hmm.
So I just opened that console, pulled out my wallet, and showed her my fake ID.
Mm-hmm.
And then I threw it back in the console. I should have known better. She then said, you sure you're not? Where would I hide a wire at? And I just pulled my wife beater up just above my eyes for like a second. And then in a flash, she reached into that console, grabbed the wallet, took my money out. It was about, and then she threw I didn't know this. She threw the wallet on the floor and kept the money. And then she shut the console without me even hearing it.
Wow.
So as soon as she did that, David Copperfield move, she goes, just pull over and let me out here. I'm like, wait a minute. This thing was going pretty well. Something ain't right. And I immediately looked, pulled the console open, saw my wallet gone. I was like, holy shit. She starts to get out of the car real quick. I reach up, I grab her coat, and she runs out of it. She's wearing, what do they call it? Like a sundress, something she'd wear in the summertime.
Okay.
It was like very sheer and skimpy. So now
Easy
I've got
access.
her coat. She runs out of those high heels. And so now she's barefoot in a sundress running from me in 4 feet of snow.
Mm.
Well, I immediately panic because I think she's got my wallet. I jump out only in my wife beater, in my sweatpants, and my Kmart sky high tennis shoes, or Skyliners, whatever they're called back then. And I take off after her, and I reach down and I grab my gun. And I got my gun in my hand and I'm chasing after her. We run around the house about 4 times. She was pretty fast. And as I'm catching up to her, she runs up to what I guess is a dope dealer's house. And she pounds on the door and she's screaming. And right now I'm at the sidewalk and the door opens up and this gigantic dude opens the door and looks at her and she's like, Lawrence, let me in the house. This guy's going to kill me. Let me in the house. And so I'm walking up to the front door, and Lawrence, I think he was kind of a wise man, kind of smart. He looks at me walking up, only wearing a wife beater, sweatpants, very angry look on my face, snow all in mixed up in my hair because I've got now, snow hanging from my hair and all this. And he's thinking, oh my God, the abominable snowman's coming my way with a gun.
Did he say abdominal?
Abominable.
Well,
Abdominal. But anyway,
we had one of those ab abductor things that used to rock on back in the day.
So I walk right up to the, where she's standing and he's standing with the door open. I walk right up. I'm on his porch, and I just held up my Glock as he's looking at me, and I pointed to it with my left hand. I said, it's a big gun. And he looked at me and he studied that gun, and then he looked over at her and she's going, please let me in the house. He's going to kill me. Well, those words ran off his back like duck on the water. He just looked at her, said, sorry, baby, and slowly shut the door.
Smart. Good job, Lawrence.
And she was like, shit. And I just looked at her and I said, now what? She reaches down and she sees this Fisher Price plastic, like little tricycle for like a 2-year-old. She picks it up and she goes, I'm going to fuck you up. And I said, again, lifted up my gun. Again, I have this big gun. You have a Fisher Price plastic toy. And she looked at it and she goes, damn it. And threw it on the ground. And she jumped off the porch and took off running. And I took off after her, but she was sprinting like Usain Bolt, barefoot in the snow. with, you know, barely a dress on. And I'm starting to realize in my wife beater that I'm cold and freezing to death, but I got to get to my wallet because I thought she had it. And after we run about a block north on this street, she zooms by a car that looks very familiar to me because it's my partner, Big Steve. And she runs by him, and then she darts between the house. I run up, I see it's Big Steve sitting in the car, nice and warm. And I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Didn't you hear me talking about that I was in pursuit of a blonde female, tall, with just a dress, no coat?" He goes, "Yeah, but, you know, I couldn't really see. Didn't know if it was you." How many other long-haired guys run around a wife beater and a gold Lumina? So anyways, he tells me he didn't correlate it because when he saw this blonde-haired girl just in a sundress running up the street as fast as she could, barefoot in the snow, he was like, "Ooh, what do we got here? Ooh la la." And I was like, "You moron, get on your radio and, you know, put out a description." So he did. And so me and him we take off looking for. A few minutes later, the uniformed guys, they immediately caught her at the liquor store that was like a block northeast of us. And when we race up there, I guess she put up a fight because they had her handcuffed. And the big fight ended up where she was laying in a big mud puddle.
Oh, poor son.
And it was freezing. And so I immediately said, "Get an ambulance out here quick," because you never know, you know, don't want her to die of pneumonia.
Right.
So we get the ambulance out there and we whisked her away and all this. And then I realized, man, I'm soaked to the bone and I'm freezing to death too. But anyways, I go back to my car because I got my money off her, but I said, "Where's my wallet?" And he said, "I don't know." Luckily, I found my wallet in my car. And, you know, so I dodged a bullet on that because one thing you don't want is your credit cards, your ID, and all your information out in the middle of the hood where crack is being sold.
Yeah.
That was the last thing I wanted. But I got lucky on that one. But
So I got a question, Super E. So
yeah.
I mean, this does sound like a David Copperfield move. You're saying in the time that you pull your shirt up over your face, she got in that console, got your wallet, and took that money out. And
yes. And like I said, it's like, you know, it's not like I pulled my wife beater up over my head and said, "See, look, you can check me out." I just did it in a flash.
wow.
And she reached in there, grabbed it without me even knowing it. And I was stuck. But see, these girls were very crafty and smart, besides, of course, risking their life on a daily, nightly basis for crack cocaine, which in the end, unfortunately, poor Summer, bless her heart, she came to a tragic end. She ended up being murdered a few months after that. It was very tragic.
Oh, man.
And well, I guess about 4 or 5 months later, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, you remember that prostitute you locked up?" I said, "Yeah." They just found her body, if I remember correctly. They just found her body in the trunk of a vehicle. Somebody had murdered her, stuffed her in a trunk, left this vehicle in a parking lot. I'm sorry, in a driveway. Now the weather was warm. And after like 4 or 5 days, people were noticing a horrible odor coming from the trunk of a car. So they ended up opening it up, and it was her. And what makes this even more tragic is that she had an older sister that was also murdered too.
Was she a prostitute as well?
Yes, she was a prostitute as well. My partner Ron had locked her up, and when he locked her up, I backed him up on that. And so I knew who she was. In fact, when I was talking to Summer about this, I was like, why are you doing this? Don't you know your sister was murdered? And it's like it didn't have any bearing on her whatsoever of her behavior out there on the street. I was like, doesn't matter. I got to get this crack. A year or so after Summer uh, was murdered, I pick up another girl on the street, arrest her, get her name. She's the third sister who's out prostituting. And I told her, wait a minute, you're out here prostituting. And she goes, yeah, this crack, I can't stop from smoking it. I gotta do this to make money for it. I said, your two sisters were murdered because of this. And she goes, I know. She goes, I don't know what to tell you. I can't stop myself.
Man.
So it's awful what goes on out there on the street.
Man, do you have any idea the circumstances on either one of their murders? Do you remember anything about that? Were they Johns that killed them?
I really don't know. I know it was involving, I believe, drugs.
Okay.
And something about drugs, death, that kind of thing.
Got it. Wow, that's that's tragic.
Yes, it is.
Good Lord.
That reminds me kind of one of our earlier episodes where Super E was talking about the prostitute who was actually off the street, married, had a couple kids. Her and her husband had bought a house, and that draw was just too much for her. She woke up one day and said, "I'm going to go back and walk the streets and smoke crack." So I can't imagine something drawing you that much. It's something that you can't understand, I would think, unless you're going through it. And that just goes again to say how much we really feel for these people who are in these positions.
Yeah.
And I know part of arresting them is to try to get them help, to get some court ordered counseling or treatment or whatever that is. I know that's the ultimate goal, is to get them off of this.
Right. And I mean, so was the third sister, was she the youngest, do you know?
I believe she was the youngest. She was not much more than 18. And she was falling right in line of her older sister's behaviors.
I mean, and just think about that. So both of her big sisters were killed doing this stuff. And it was just so powerful. She was willing to risk it. That's really, really sad, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, yeah. Jay, when you was in sex crimes, how many times did you find out that women were raped and beaten, and then they just basically didn't want to file charges or anything like that? I mean, these girls were raped all the time.
Yeah, that did happen periodically. And then, we did have the case that you and I kind of double teamed, because the guy was raping prostitutes, and we went back several years on those cases and dug out files and found that. And I remember you and Big Steve would help me with one particular victim. She was, while we're waiting trial, where we're doing depositions and all the things we do with it, she's still out on the street.
Right.
And after this had happened.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I would need her for, a deposition or for trial or for a meeting or something. I would call Super E. I'm like, okay, I need, her name started with a B. I need B. Can you help me out? And like 2:30, my phone would ring. Hey, we got her. You need her? Yep, on my way.
Man.
Now, Jay, was she the one that was walking the street with a colostomy bag on?
After, yes. If I recall, because she got cancer during all of this as well. Is that the one we're talking about?
Yes, I believe so. And Big Steve told me that she was walking the street wearing a colostomy bag.
Yep, that was her. That was her. She was we started with, I think we found 7 victims that this guy had, who were all prostitutes that he had raped. And when we got to trial, we were down to 3 that could testify because of the tragedies.
Man.
Exactly.
Yep. But the shithead got 110 years. So we'll take
Good.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Good job, Jay.
Yeah.
Man.
System worked on that one.
Yeah. Man. Well, okay. So Super E, so this is an instance or a couple instances where these street prostitutes, 2 of them got murdered. We are going to do a separate podcast about another John who ended up being a serial killer, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He was a very big, powerful man, and he viewed prostitutes as the easiest target, but he also viewed them as just disposable. They don't matter. They don't count. They are just at ends to satisfy their perverted desires. And when they kill them, they don't think it's like they just swatted a bug or something.
So, and again, that's going to be, that might be our next podcast that we do talking about this serial killer. Do you remember how many girls he killed?
He was suspected in killing 5, I believe.
Okay.
Suspected killing 5, and then several of the women who survived identified him for raping them. And one of them I knew that survived. She told me the most chilling tale of where she almost died at the hands of this man.
But she was able to get away.
She was able to get away and tell it to me. And again, it's like they were afraid to call the police and tell them, hey, this is what happened to me, because they think that people just look at him like, well, you deserve what you got. Well, that's not how police look at it. We look at them, you're a victim, you need to tell us this, but they're afraid. So when she called me, I was able to convince her, you need to tell the police about this. And she ended up cooperating.
That's awesome. And that's also what we call a teaser for the
Exactly.
next episode.
Yes. So you know what? That is going to be our next podcast, everybody. So
Yeah.
it
stay
is an
tuned.
interesting and tragic story. And
that may or may not include a special call-in guest.
yes, it might. And who would that guest be, Jay?
The boss man.
The boss man.
The boss man.
All right.
Yes. And man, oh man.
And he was a sex crime detective that had several of these cases on this guy we're going to talk about. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Super E and him, I think, worked together on that one as well. Would that be correct, Super E?
That is correct.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, all right. Well, let's begin to close this one out. Super E, do you have anything to take us out with the tale you just told?
Basically, everybody has a value. Just because somebody's got issues doesn't mean, we want to demean them or cast them aside. Try to help them.
Man, that's perfect. Couldn't have been said better. And oftentimes it's the police that have that exact feeling about people that you just described. And sometimes we get cast off as not having feelings or caring. And I can guarantee you, anybody that's doing this, especially in the specialty positions like we all talk about, you care. When
You do.
Well, yeah, absolutely. A-Train, what do you think? Oh, wait a minute, Super. You got a thought.
Hey, Train, take us out.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Hey, wait a minute. That's my line. I know it's your show, Super,
Yeah,
but that's my
It's
line.
Jay's.
Don't listen.
Hey, Jay,
Yes.
take us out.
I'm going to let you do it, A-Train. That's your
I don't
job.
want to.
A-Train,
Okay.
take us out of here.
All right, everybody. We're gonna come back with another one, and hope you listen. Thanks.